Hey, what's up YouTube? Chris Sider here, founder of Ex-Boyfriend Recovery. Today we're going to be talking about what signs to keep an eye out for to tell you if your ex has moved on to someone new. Now, like always, I want to give you an opportunity to take a moment and take our free Ex Recovery Chances quiz. In my opinion, the most important question that you need to get answered right off the bat is if you have a chance of getting your ex back or not. Well, I've actually put together a special quiz designed to answer this exact question for you on our website. All you have to do if you want to take this quiz is simply look in the description link below the YouTube video. Once you click on that link, it will take you directly to our quiz. You're going to be asked questions about you, your ex, and your relationship or your time together. And then based on how you answer your questions, we're going to take your answers and run them through our advanced algorithm, and it's going to spit out a score so that you can figure out what kind of chance roughly you have of getting your ex back. So again, if you're interested in taking that quiz and you think this is something you absolutely need to do, it should only take you about 2 minutes, and all you have to do is simply look in the description link of this video below. Click on that link, we will get you taken care of, and then you can come right back here and continue watching this video about your ex moving on to someone else. Well, hopefully they didn't do that. Let's begin.
Today we're going to be diving into 5 real-life signs that your ex is going to be dating someone else. A lot of times this is your worst case scenario. You don't want your ex dating someone else, but sometimes you're in that gray area where you're not really sure. You haven't heard from them. Maybe your friends have come to you and said like, hey, I've seen him or, her with someone else out and about, and you start freaking out. Well, I want you to use this video to kind of have a checklist of things that you can check off and determine if your ex is with someone else or if it's likely. These are 5 real-life signs based on my own life and also other people's lives that we found with our clients. So, the first sign is pretty straightforward. You start noticing their social media patterns change. Human beings are pattern entities. We always like to get in patterns, especially when it comes to all facets of our life, like social media, right? And a lot of people, when I say like, okay, I want you to pay attention to the pattern your ex is having on social media, they start looking for pictures of the other woman or pictures of the other guy, or, oh, he commented or she commented on this other guy or this other girl's photo. What does that mean? I'm actually saying, yes, pay attention to that, but what you can also start paying attention to is, let's say that your ex likes or comments on your photos, right? They personal message you, and then all of a sudden that pattern gets interrupted. It stops. That can happen, especially when your ex meets someone else and they're not trying to do anything to rock the boat, like talking to their ex, right? Because they know that's a bad thing and could potentially harm that potential future relationship. So start paying attention to any kind of patterns that you notice that are changing. That's sign number 1. Sign number 2 is you hear from your friends, from your mutual friends, that they're with someone else. And I'd actually kind of like to put an asterisk next to this one, not because it's a bad sign. I had to put it here because so many people have cited this as a reason or a way that, they found out that their ex was with someone new. But I would actually like to put an asterisk next to this because I think sometimes the messaging is a little false. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, have you ever played that game Telephone? The game is really simple. Basically, you line up a bunch of people in a line. You start at one end of the line and you give someone a message. Let's pretend the message is something like, hey, I love red birds, right? And their job is to simply whisper it down the line, so on and so forth, until it gets to the end of the line. And then when you get to the end of the line, that person is supposed to recite what the message is. The problem is when that person gets to the end of the line, the message is completely different, right? So instead of it being, I love red birds, it's I love bluebirds, or I love red hawks, or something like that, right? And the game is played to show you the differences in how people not communicate, but process communication, right? So sometimes we can take small things and alter it, and it really can impact what the next person is going to hear. And I kind of look at like trusting your friends' words on it like this. It's kind of like playing a game of telephone. Maybe you're not getting the whole story. Maybe, sure, they saw your ex out and about with some other girl, assuming you're trying to get your ex-boyfriend back. They saw your ex with some other girl, but it was just maybe his sister or something, and your friend didn't know that. So it's important to get as much details from your mutual friends as possible so that you can kind of figure out what the real truth is. But I would even put an asterisk next to that, because ultimately, maybe I'm not that much of a believer. Maybe I don't take a lot on faith, but I like to see things with my own eyes, and I think you should be the same way here. So sign number 3 is actually them not responding. Now, I'd like to tell you a personal story here. Whether you like it or not, I learned the hard way that dating is kind of a numbers game. As weird as that sounds. And I'll give you a perfect example. The way I used to date when I ended my first relationship, which would have been the first year of college, I was single for 5 years. Now, why? Well, it's because I failed to understand that dating is a numbers game. Right. So what I would do is I believed, like all the romantic comedies out there, that, there's that soulmate, that one true person for you. And what I would do is I was always into quality as opposed to quantity. So while my friend was out dating tons of girls, I would be very, very specific about the girls I would try to take out on a date. I would focus on maybe like 1 or 2 a year that really caught my interest, and I'd go all in on them and then probably blow up because they didn't like me, or I'd find something wrong with them and kind of feel sad that I was lonely, right? It wasn't until around year 4 or maybe even year 5 that I realized, okay, maybe I should change my approach. Maybe instead of just focusing all of my energy into one person, I should focus my energy into a lot of different people, see which ones I click with, and then focus on that person. And that's actually how I met my wife. I believe I was talking to 4 people at once, and 3 people at once. And the minute I met my wife, she was the 4th, I knew something was special. I knew something was different about this girl and here's how I knew, right? Every time I would get a text message from her, I would stop everything I was doing. I didn't care about anything at one point. I just wanted a text message from her. And I remember she did not have an iPhone, and I do have an iPhone. And the cool thing about it is when you're talking to someone with an iPhone, it comes up, the message that you receive from them, the text message that you receive from them is a blue, right? She didn't have an iPhone, and most of the people I was talking to had blue sort of text messages. She had green text messages, and I just remember every time I would see a green text message from her, I'd kind of be giddy like a little schoolgirl. But anyways, what ended up happening is once I started realizing I'm starting to like this person, I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize my chances, and I knew that I didn't want to scare her off. It was like I found some rare unicorn. And so what I ended up doing is I kind of handled it one of 2 ways. All the other girls that I was talking to, I decided I'm going to cut off contact with them. I'm going to either ignore them or block them. In fact, I did start off just wanting to ignore them all, hoping that they would get the hint to stop talking to me because I didn't want to be super rude and have a confrontation with them. But one girl pushed me, and I'm going to tell you that story in a little bit. But the important thing is I actually started ignoring the other people trying to sort of make way for my wife, which I didn't know at the time was going to be my wife. I wanted all of my focus to be singularly on her. And that's ended up what happening, but it's an important thing. The story is important for you to understand because that was my process behind ignoring the people I'm talking to. So if your ex starts ignoring you all of a sudden, seemingly out of the blue, that could be an indication that he's met someone worthy of his or her time. So, and I'm going to tell you the story about the blocked person in a little bit. That's actually a whole separate entity or a whole separate sign that we're going to be covering. But let's move on and talk about sign number 4, and that's the pendulum swing. So I've got another interesting story for you here. When I was in college, during that space where I was single for 5 years, I had a friend who was almost like a magician when it came to getting girlfriends. he was good looking, but I wouldn't say he was better looking than me or anything like that. I was never jealous of his looks, so to speak. I just recognized that, okay, girls think he's good looking. I was always jealous of his ability to open up and talk with girls, to the point where he was really good at it. He ended up getting a lot of girlfriends over the time. He ended up going through a huge breakup, and then during that time, he ended up sleeping with a bunch of girls. And I'll never forget, there was one time him and I were having dinner one night, and he was telling me this story about this girl that he slept with. And it turns out that the girl he slept with had a boyfriend, which, yeah, I didn't like give him a hard time about, because in my mind, okay, it's that girl's responsibility not to cheat on her boyfriend, and my friend is just the way my friend is, right? But it was a fascinating story. He told me that he ended up sleeping with this girl and then kind of felt a little bit bad about the fact that she had a boyfriend, so he kind of went away a little bit, and circumstances occurred where they ended up at a get-together or a gathering together, right? And he noticed that the girl was there with her boyfriend, and the entire time he's sitting there thinking, I totally slept with that girl, and this guy has no idea about it. And he had some guilt, but also he kind of had a weird pride, sort of like, oh, yep, notch on my belt, which is not a good way to treat women, obviously. But the interesting thing is the insight that he learned from watching the girl. Now, the girl obviously didn't want the boyfriend to know that she had cheated on him, right? So she did something really interesting. She would swing from one end of the spectrum to the other, almost like a pendulum. You know how a pendulum will swing like that, where she would get super angry. She would have a real quick temper with her boyfriend in front of my friend, and then the next minute she'd be super in love, making out with this guy in the corner, almost trying to show off and trying to make my friend jealous, which obviously didn't work. But I think that's an interesting insight, because that's something I've seen a lot with my coaching clients. Not specifically the same situation here, but this idea of the pendulum, of moving from one end of the spectrum to the other. It's really easy, especially when someone else is involved, where you decide that you want to become friends with your ex, right? You're not like me, where you just cut off all the other people that you're talking to, or potential girlfriends or boyfriends, right? You decide you're just going to remain platonic friends with the people you're talking to with your ex, right? But you start having these short tempers with your ex, and then you start giving them false hope, and then you just kind of go all over the place. If you start to notice a really huge pickup in this pendulum swing, this left to right of being angry and then being in love, that could also be a sign that your ex has met someone else. Now, sign number 5 is interesting. This is where they tell you specifically not to talk to them, or they tell you specifically that they met someone else. Right. Now, I told you a couple of minutes ago that when I met my wife, there were 3 girls that I was talking to, right? And I knew the moment I met my wife that she was all I wanted to put my attention on. I had no interest in dealing with these other girls, because I realized if I'm feeling this strongly for this one girl, there's no way I can ever feel strongly for the other girls. So I'm just going to remove them from the equation. And I did that mostly by ignoring them, right? So sometimes you get some messages like, hey, where'd you go? And you just ignore it, and they kind of get the hint. Essentially, I'm ghosted them, which isn't the nice way to handle it, but it is a way I handled it, and I kind of don't feel bad about it, as weird as that sounds. There was one girl who kept pushing me, though. Kept pushing me to the point where she would send messages like this, like, hey, why do I get the sense that you're ignoring me on purpose? You know, she would get real angry, and it provoked me enough one time after she just would not leave me alone, and I was just sort of like, leave me alone, that I decided to explain to her why I was doing it. And I said, hey, look, I met the most amazing girl and would like to focus on her. I'd appreciate it if you gave me some space. Now, of course, this didn't go over very well with this particular person, to the point where she got angry at me, she started fighting with me, and I kind of was like, tough luck, and blocked her. No, I completely blocked her. What I did was tell her that, hey, look, I know you have a crush on me, and I know I was trying to sort of explore if you were worth dating, but I met someone who I'm really falling for, and I'm not interested, and I don't want to lead you on. And so I ended that, and she just couldn't handle it, and I blocked her as a result. That's the story behind that. So what we had here was me specifically telling her that I met someone else. Now, this is kind of a rare occurrence because most men and women are afraid of that kind of a confrontation. And I was too. It took her basically pestering me 24/7 for a response to finally get me to sort of say this, right? But that's something that you can keep in mind. That's the fifth and final sign that I would say you need to look at if your ex has met someone else.